My name is Arthur Vance, and at 24, I never expected my university graduation ceremony would become the quietest, most devastating revenge. Standing in my cap and gown beside my brother Julian should have been a moment of shared triumph, but years of carefully measured neglect had led to this day. I can still hear their voices, calm and rational, echoing in my memory. His is an investment in the mind. Yours is a trade. The memory of that evening when my parents decided only my brother was worthy of their legacy still leaves a metallic taste in my mouth. Before I tell you what made my parents' perfectly composed faces crumble in the grand hall of our university, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like button if you've ever felt like you had to build your own ladder while someone else was given an elevator. I grew up in what appeared to be a perfectly respectable family in a leafy suburb of Oxford. Our terraced house, filled with books from floor to ceiling, looked idyllic from the outside, a fortress of intellectualism. The family portraits on the wall captured strained smiles that hid the truth of the matter. My parents, Dr. Alistair and Dr. Beatrice Vance, were academics. Father was a literature professor, mother an art historian. We weren't aristocrats, but we were comfortable, secure in a world where intellectual pursuits were the highest form of currency. My brother Julian was 2 years younger than me, but in our parents' world, he was light years ahead. With his quick wit, his effortless grasp of abstract theories, and a natural charm that won over every visiting academic, he was the embodiment of their values. From the beginning, the dynamic was set. Julian was the prodigy, and I was the practical, slightly disappointing afterthought. I can still picture birthdays where Julian would receive a rare first edition or a high-powered telescope to expand his universe, while I'd get a handsome but practical set of tools or a biography of some great industrialist. Your brother's mind needs stimulation, Arthur, Mother would explain, a faint note of apology in her voice. You've always been so wonderfully self-sufficient. Even at 10 years old, I knew this was a polite way of saying my interests were less important. School events were a masterclass in their selective support. For Julian's debate club championships, both parents would be in the front row taking meticulous notes. For my design and technology exhibitions, where my intricate models and working prototypes were displayed, I was lucky if my father stopped by for 5 minutes on his way to the library. It's excellent craftsmanship, son, he'd say, patting my shoulder. But it's a hobby. It won't shape the way people think. I got into King's, I announced at dinner, my voice shaking with pride. Full acceptance to the engineering program. My father looked up from his book. Well done, Arthur. A solid choice. Minutes later, Julian breezed in, waving his own letter. King's College! The philosophy department offered me a place. The change in my parents was instantaneous. Father closed his book. Mother stood up to embrace Julian. Dinner was forgotten in favor of an impromptu celebration with a bottle of vintage port my father had been saving. We always knew your mind was destined for great things, he beamed at Julian, seemingly forgetting that I had just announced an equivalent achievement. 2 weeks later, the conversation happened. We were seated in the study, the air thick with the smell of old paper and furniture polish. We need to discuss university, Father began, his gaze fixed on Julian. We've had an education fund for you since you were born. King's is expensive, but we can cover your tuition and living expenses entirely. We want you to focus purely on your studies. Julian glowed. I waited for my turn, assuming the fund was for both of us. The silence stretched. And my tuition? I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. The atmosphere in the room grew cold. My parents exchanged a look I knew all too well. Arthur, my father said slowly, we only have enough in the fund for one. And Julian's path requires a level of academic immersion, a freedom from practical concerns. We believe investing in his education is an investment in pure intellect, my mother added, her voice soft but firm. You've always been so resourceful. You could get a student loan. Or perhaps start at a polytechnic and transfer later. Then came the words that fractured my world. His is an investment in the mind. Yours is a trade. I stared at them, the sheer intellectual snobbery of it all taking my breath away. Years of being the lesser son, the practical mind in a family of theorists, had culminated in this. I was not worthy of their investment. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. That night, after the verdict was delivered, I went for a long walk. The neat, quiet streets of my childhood felt alien. My entire life, I had been trying to win a game where the rules were written to ensure I'd lose. My top grades, my national award, my place at a top university, none of it mattered. I wasn't the right kind of clever. The next morning, I confronted them. "How could you only say for Julian?" I asked, my voice raw. Mother sighed into her tea. "Arthur, it wasn't personal. It was a pragmatic decision about finite resources and different kinds of potential." "I won a national award," I countered. "I've been working for 2 years. How is that not potential?" Father set down his copy of The Guardian. "Your brother's path is academic. It is clear. Your interests, while admirable, are vocational. It's a different track altogether." The conversation was over. They had made their decision. That weekend, I took a train to see my Grandpa Frank. As I told him the story, he just listened, polishing a carburetor with a clean rag. "My boy," he said when I finished, "your parents are brilliant people, but they're blind. They live in a world of ideas and forget that the world itself is built, not thought into existence. You have a fire in you they don't understand. Promise me you won't let them put it out." That night, I made my choice. I would go to King's College. I would do it myself, and I would succeed on my own terms. The next few weeks were a blur of applications for scholarships, grants, and loans. I pieced together enough for the first year's tuition, co-signed by my grandfather. While my parents took Julian shopping for new tweed jackets and a MacBook, I found a grim, tiny room in a shared flat in Zone 4, a 50-minute tube ride from campus. I found a job pulling pints at a pub near the university and a weekend position at a community workshop. On moving day, my parents drove Julian to his catered hall of residence in our family Volvo. I followed on the train with 2 oversized suitcases. As we parted ways at the station, my mother said, "Good luck, Arthur. I hope you know what you're doing." The doubt in her voice was the only fuel I needed. This wouldn't just work. It would be my masterpiece. Freshman year was a brutal lesson in efficiency. My days started at dawn with textbook readings on the tube and ended long after midnight, smelling of stale beer and polish. I survived on cheap pasta and the sheer, stubborn refusal to fail. While Julian was attending wine and cheese nights with his philosophy society, I was calculating whether I could afford to print my engineering schematics in color. But something strange happened amidst the struggle. My engineering classes made perfect sense. While other students grappled with theoretical concepts of load-bearing and material stress, I was seeing them in the world around me, in the sagging shelf at the pub, in the rattling frame of the tube carriage. My hands-on experience gave me an edge. My structures professor, a gruff Welshman named Davies, stopped me after a lecture. "Vance," he barked, "your analysis of structural failure in that case study, it wasn't just theoretical. You see the weak points. You have an instinct for it. It's rare." For the first time, my struggle was being seen as a strength. My flatmate, Liam, a sharp-witted history student from Newcastle, noticed my relentless schedule. "Mate," he said one night, finding me asleep over a textbook, "you're going to burn out. What's the story?" When I told him, he just shook his head. "The Porsche intellectuals, eh? Think they're the only ones with brains." Liam became my chosen family. He'd make sure there was food left for me after a late shift and would drill me on historical facts for his exams in exchange for me fixing his perpetually broken laptop. "We look after our own," he'd say. "And you, my friend, are one of us." Midway through my second year, the pub cut my hours. Panic set in. I remembered Professor Davies's words and, on a whim, went to see him. He listened to my situation and then recommended me for a paid position as a research assistant in the university's engineering lab. The work was fascinating, the pay was better, and it was a stepping stone. Working in the lab, I began using the university's 3D printers and CNC machines to design and build custom solutions for small businesses I found online. Specialized jigs, replacement parts for obsolete machinery, ergonomic tool handles. The seed of an idea planted in Grandpa Frank's workshop began to sprout. I created a simple website offering bespoke design and fabrication services. By the start of my third year, my small business was bringing in enough to let me quit the pub. My grades were at the top of my class. My confidence grew. The boy who felt invisible was now being sought out by classmates for help with their projects. Julian and I maintained a distant but civil relationship. He was thriving in his world of ideas, largely oblivious to the realities of mine. At the end of my third year, my business had evolved. I was now Vance Applied Design, employing 2 other engineering students part-time. We weren't just fixing things, we were innovating, creating products for niche markets. The business covered my living expenses and allowed me to start paying back my loans. Professor Davies nominated me for the Royal Engineering Society's Undergraduate Innovation Prize, which came with a scholarship that covered my entire final year's tuition. For the first time, I could breathe. What I didn't know was that my story was quietly spreading through the faculty. Senior year began. My business was featured in a trade magazine. My academic work was positioning me as one of the top students in my year. It was Professor Davies who approached me with the opportunity. "The university selects one student to give an address at the graduation ceremony, Arthur," he said. "The faculty has unanimously chosen you. Your story? It's what this university should be about." I accepted, my heart pounding. As my professional life soared, Julian's hit a wall. His final thesis, a complex piece on Kantian ethics, was proving difficult. He was brilliant, but he had never had to truly struggle, to manage his time and energy with brutal efficiency. One evening, he showed up at my flat looking defeated. "I'm drowning, Arthur," he confessed. "I don't know how to structure this. I don't know how to work this hard." I looked at my brother, and for the first time, I felt not resentment, but a strange sense of pity. I sat him down and, using the project management skills I'd learned running a business, I helped him break down his thesis into manageable tasks. We started talking, truly talking. "How do you do all this?" he asked, gesturing around my small office, filled with prototypes and order forms. I told him everything. The 60-hour weeks, the financial stress, the constant fear of failure. He listened, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "I had no idea," he whispered. "Mom and Dad just said you were being independent." "Independent wasn't a choice," I said. "It was a requirement." That conversation changed our relationship. He started to see the world outside the bubble our parents had created. Graduation day dawned, bright and crisp. My phone buzzed. It was Julian. "See you there, graduate. Incredibly proud to be your brother." My grandfather arrived, presenting me with a gift, a beautiful vintage slide rule. "For the man who measures twice and cuts once," he said, his eyes shining. "You earned this." The ceremony was held in a magnificent hall. As we filed in, I saw my parents in the front rows, their eyes scanning the crowd for Julian. When our eyes met, my father gave a brief, polite nod. Grandpa Frank, sitting beside them, gave me a huge, conspiratorial wink. The ceremony proceeded. Finally, the Dean of Engineering approached the podium. "Before we conclude, we have a special student address. This year, it will be delivered by a student who exemplifies the fusion of intellectual rigor and practical innovation. Arthur Vance." I walked to the stage, catching a glimpse of my parents' confused faces. They clearly hadn't expected this. I took a breath and began. 4 years ago, I came to this university with a toolbox, a student loan, and a belief that an education should be built, not just received. I spoke about resilience, about the lessons learned in workshops and pubs, about how the greatest innovations often come from the greatest constraints. I didn't mention my parents, but I told my story. "The most valuable thing I learned at King's," I concluded, "is that the limitations others place on you are a reflection of their world, not a measure of yours." As I finished to a wave of applause, the dean returned to the microphone. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. And now I have the pleasure of making a few additional announcements." He paused. "First, The faculty of the School of Engineering is proud to name Arthur Vance as this year's top graduating student, with the highest honors and a perfect academic record. A ripple of applause went through the hall. I glanced at my parents. Their polite smiles were frozen. Furthermore, the dean continued, Mr. Vance is this year's winner of the Royal Engineering Society's National Innovation Prize for his work in applied design. The applause grew louder. My parents' faces had paled. But what many of you may not know, the dean's voice boomed through the silent hall, is that Mr. Vance achieved all of this while being entirely self-funded, working multiple jobs and building his own successful company from the ground up without any family financial support. A gasp went through the audience. In that moment, the private shame they had inflicted on me became public knowledge. I saw my father's hand clench. My mother looked down at her lap. In recognition of his incredible journey, I am pleased to announce that Mr. Vance has been headhunted by Corbin Design, one of the world's leading innovation firms. His story will also be the cover feature of next month's Engineers Weekly magazine. The hall erupted in a standing ovation. Through the thunder, I watched my parents' faces drained of all color, their carefully constructed world of intellectual superiority shattered by the success of the son they had written off as a simple tradesman. Julian was on his feet, clapping wildly, tears on his face. Grandpa Frank was beaming, his proud smile the only validation I had ever truly needed. And one final thing, the dean shouted over the applause. In honor of Mr. Vance's example, the university is establishing the Arthur Vance Applied Innovation Grant to provide financial aid to students who demonstrate exceptional determination in the face of adversity. After the ceremony, as relatives rushed to congratulate us, my parents stood awkwardly. Well, Arthur, my father said, his voice strained. This was all quite a surprise. Not really, I replied calmly. I've been here the whole time. You just weren't looking in the right place. Before he could answer, Julian stepped to my side, putting a firm arm around my shoulder. Isn't it incredible what he accomplished? He said loudly for all our nearby relatives to hear. Imagine what he could have done if he'd had the same support I did. My mother flinched. Actually, I said, turning to my grandfather and Julian, I have a celebration lunch with my team and my mentors, my real support system. I'm coming with you, Grandpa declared. Me too, Julian said, stepping away from our parents to join us. The sight of their two sons, one they had lauded and one they had dismissed, walking away together, left my parents standing alone in the crowd. Their judgment had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. The family I was choosing was the one that had been there all along, and the future I was walking toward was one I had built with my own two hands. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you prove your worth, not to them, but to yourself? Share your story in the comments. And remember to subscribe, because sometimes the best revenge is simply building a life that is bigger and better than their limited imagination could ever have allowed.